All right, we have people coming in. I see
It's like
lots
a
of familiar
great group.
faces. Not faces, I see lots of familiar names coming in. Well, thanks everyone for coming here. We're going to give it just a minute while people join. I think many of you who come to a lot of our coffee and combos kind of know the deal. You got to stick around till the end to take that exit survey where you can kind of tell us a little bit about how you got here, what you found useful, and yeah, that's very helpful for us, and it is kind of your ticket to get your coffee gift certificate. So make sure you stick around for that. Most of you, a lot of any returnees also know that chat, we're going to run any questions through the chat. I'll get them to our presenter throughout the presentation, or if we're not able to kind of break in and ask during the presentation, we'll get them to Ryan and Scott during Q&A at the end. So yeah, Dan Schmidt, you're already on it. Let's warm up the chat, kind of talk about where you're from, where you're tuning in from. I'm in Minneapolis. We have some presenters from all over the place now. So I'm going to pass it over to Scott now that we've done some light housekeeping, and we'll just get the show on the road.
Hey everybody! It is such an absolute pleasure to see everybody. I'm so excited to about this presentation today, and I have the pleasure of introducing Ryan with Absolute, and just really want to talk about the incredible importance that we have when we manage our devices. Up until a few weeks ago, I was a director of educational technology in a school district. Before that, I was a middle school principal. So I was there running a one-to-one initiative during COVID and all that. And the incredible importance of managing those devices when you have a handful of those devices that are breaking every year or lost, and this is an absolutely awesome tool that I'm so excited to have this this incredible tool. Ryan's awesome in our meetings. Really looking forward to an incredible conversation. I'll be in the chat if you guys have any questions, along with Kate. Yeah, that's all I have. I'll hand it off to Ryan, and look forward to this awesome presentation.
Thanks so much, Scott. It's great to meet everyone here. I'm going to run through a few slides today, and I have a bit of a demo as well, and we'll end off with a Q&A session. And just while I'm sharing my screen, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a director of product management here at Absolute, and I've been with the company about 6 years working with education customers. I'm not a teacher myself, but my mom was a school teacher, and her mom taught in the Faculty of Education in university, and her mom was a school teacher. So I like to think that education runs in my blood, and I always love talking to education customers. So today I want to talk about lost and missing devices quite a lot, and simplified workflows for tracking devices. And hopefully through this presentation, we work through some great tools to help you with devices which can really eat up a lot of time. First, I want to tell you a little bit about Absolute. If you haven't heard about Absolute before, we're a company that is active on 13.6 million endpoints. What's interesting is that we have a very close relationship with 28 different PC OEMs, which means the Absolute solution is embedded in the firmware of over 500 million endpoints. Across the world, we have about 17,000 customers in 50 different countries. And so that's just a little snapshot of who Absolute is. And as we go through, you'll see more about our capabilities. I'm going to talk about some common problems in K-12 one-to-one programs, and these might be very familiar to you. I've certainly talked to a lot of different people who have these problems and similar issues. The first one is messaging students and staff. The second one is managing missing devices. This can eat up a huge amount of time. The third common problem is year-end inventory and device collection. And the fourth is ECF inventory tracking and audit preparedness. So 4 common problems. I'm sure you have at least one of these problems, if not all of them. And I'm hoping to show you some tools that will help out in each of these cases. First of all, messaging. So how can you send a message that goes to the user of the device and not the assigned user? I can very easily send an email to an individual, but that doesn't mean necessarily that it goes to the person who has the device. We know that devices get swapped around in schools all the time, and the person that has the device I have in mind isn't necessarily the assigned user. So that can be tricky. How do you send a message to the user of the device and not the assigned user? Also, how do you send a message that cannot be ignored? Email is great. It's very convenient. It is easy to use. You can send a lot of information. You can get information back, but it's also very easy to ignore it. I don't know if your inbox looks anything like my inbox, but I have a whole lot of unread messages. And I know with students, it's even worse. It's very easy for email to be ignored. So when you have something important that you need to share with a student, how do you send that message? Also, how can you collect information? So sometimes it's enough just to send a notification. Maybe it's about a hardware issue, or maybe it's about device reclamation, getting devices back at the end of the school year. Maybe it's just a notification, but sometimes you actually need to collect some information back from the student as well. So how can you send a message like that? And finally, if that device is at risk for some particular reason, how can you prevent further use of that device? So those are kind of the questions that I have when I want to send a message to a student. How can I achieve all of those goals? And there's all sorts of different kinds of messages that you might want to send. Your device is due to be returned in 2 weeks, or you have the wrong device. Please see the tech coordinator. We've detected a hardware problem. Please see IT. You're in unauthorized possession of a device owned by the school district. So all very interesting cases. And you could even extend that into things like, hey, it's a snow day. Don't come into school today, depending on the time of year and what's going on around you. With Absolute, there are 2 different messaging tools that we have as part of the platform. The first is end user messaging, and this is going to send a message to the current user of the device. So whoever has that device, it could be a student, it could be somebody who's found the device and thought, hey, I'll use this laptop. It looks great. And this is a way for you to send a message directly to the user of the device. That message has to be acknowledged. So there are a couple different styles of that message. It could be a dialogue type message like you see in the image on the right-hand side of the screen there, or it could be a full screen message that takes up the whole screen. Either way, there are a few buttons on the bottom of the message, and you have to acknowledge that message before you can continue on with your work. And finally, as part of that message, you can actually collect some information. That might be a drop down where you have a few choices, for example, that you're offering the student or whoever has control of that device. Or it could be just a text box where you can collect any kind of free text information as part of that message. The second messaging tool is device freeze. So when you know that a device is at risk and you don't want that device to be used anymore, you can issue a device freeze, and that's going to lock out anybody who's currently logged into the computer. It's going to prevent anybody else from logging in, and at the same time, it will display a message. So it could be very simple, like the image at the bottom there. This computer has been locked. Please contact this phone number. Or it could be a more detailed message that explains why the computer is locked. Maybe, and we'll take a look at some location tools a little bit later in the presentation, but maybe that device has left the state, or maybe it's left the country even. So you could put that into the freeze message and say, this device has left the United States in contravention of our policy. Please contact us immediately. So device freeze is very similar to end user messaging, but it's going to take the additional step of locking out whoever is logged in to the computer at the time and prevent any further access. The second major problem that I want to talk about today is missing devices. So this is very, very closely tied to messaging. Now we know about a few tools that Absolute offers to message users and even potentially lock them out. How could we handle missing devices? The first thing to acknowledge is that all missing devices aren't necessarily the same. There are missing devices in different categories. So for example, you could have a misplaced device. This is a device that's maybe hidden under the bed or on top of the fridge or under a pile of laundry. It's not really missing. It's you know, in the place where it's supposed to be. It's just difficult to find. And so I think of that as a misplaced device. You also have missing devices that have simply been picked up by other students. All laptops look pretty similar, and it's very easy to pick up somebody else's laptop and your login works. So, you know, it doesn't really matter. You just use the one that you have. Unfortunately, it's very important to track who actually is in control of the device. And so while that might not be so big of a problem for the student, it's a much bigger problem for us. So we need to identify, okay, if you've got a missing device, is it misplaced, or has it been picked up by another student, or is it being misused? It's potentially used by a non-student. So sometimes we hear about this case as well, where the student knows exactly where the device is. It's not missing at all. It's being used by another family member or being used by a friend, somebody that's known to the student, but it's being misused. This is not necessarily why we purchased the device to begin with. And so it's important to understand whether that device is being misused. And then finally, stolen. And so that's often when we think about missing devices, stolen is the first thing that comes to mind. And it could be that the student left the laptop at the library and you know, went to go retrieve a book from the shelf. And when they came back, the laptop was gone. So this is kind of the stolen device case. Each of these is going to call for a slightly different approach. So it's important to first quickly identify which of those cases you're confronted with, and then finally have some tools that can help you with each of those cases. With Absolute, you have a few tools at hand. First, you can determine who's currently using the device. So we are tracking the person who's logging into the device, and we'll show that to you in the Absolute console. You can see whether that is the same as the assigned user, in which case maybe the device has been misplaced, or maybe it just hasn't been used for a while. Maybe it's been in a drawer, or you can see if it's being used by a different user, because you can see who's currently logged into the device or who's logged into it most recently. You can also track device location. So you can see right on a map where that device is, or the last time it connected to a network, where that device is, and also look back in time to see the history of where that device was. You're also able to flag missing devices and get an email alert when those devices come online. So for devices that you know are missing, you're expecting that at some point somebody will find them. You know, maybe they'll be found under the bed, and somebody will switch them on, they'll connect to the network, and you'll get an email alert. So that's a really easy way to track missing devices, and just be alerted as soon as they connect to the network. We talked about device freeze, so that's another great option for at-risk devices. And then finally, we have an investigations team as part of our Resilience for Education license. That investigations team is a very, very skilled team composed mostly of ex-law enforcement investigations staff, and they can go and find stolen devices, and they are incredibly effective at tracking down stolen devices and getting those returned to you. So those are a few different options here for missing devices, and a little bit later on, as I go into the demo, we can take a look and see how those options work. Year-end inventory and device collection. We could probably have an entire webinar on this piece because, boy, does it take a lot of work. There's always a certain number of devices that just come back, and that's great. But the ones that don't come back so easily are the ones that consume all the work. Absolute has a year-end inventory and device collection handbook, which is a great guide, which lays out 5 different phases here for that year-end inventory collection. The first phase starts 45 to 60 days, sort of a month and a half, 2 months before the device collection period. And this is really just for planning. If you plan to send out some messages, either through our tool or email or on the website, this is when you would create the content for those messages, make sure that all the information is up to date, all the contact information is correct, and make sure that you have a plan for what you're going to do during that year-end inventory collection. Phase 2 is the notification phase. And we recommend that you use several different messaging tools in order to make sure that you get as broad a cross-section as possible. The end user messaging that I talked about is a great tool because it goes directly to whoever has that device, but it's also useful to email parents, for example, have messages, notifications on the website and other channels like that. And one reminder is probably not enough. For most students, it takes several reminders. So we recommend 30 days, 15 days before, 1 week before, and 1 day before the device collection period, just to make sure that everyone is very aware, not just that the device has to come back, because they're probably aware of that, but where the device has to go to, what the timelines are, and just make sure everything is crystal clear to improve the number of devices that come back in that first phase. So phase 3, collect through your normal mechanisms, how you would normally collect devices. And then in phase 4, this is the recovery period. This is when the recovery period starts. 1 to 2 days after that device collection period, any devices that haven't come back yet, you would go into the Absolute console, mark those missing. So then as soon as those devices come online, you get an email notification and you know that you can start to investigate those devices. So those missing devices will start to filter in 5 to 7 days after the device collection period ends. Then we would think about escalating that messaging to a device freeze to prevent further use of the device. Continue to show that message so whoever tries to use that device understands why the device is frozen and what they should do with that device next. And then finally in phase 5, this is the monitoring stage where you would periodically monitor the devices that hadn't come back yet and try and determine which case they fall into. Are they just misplaced? Are they still offline? They haven't connected to a network. They're just waiting to be discovered, or are they actively being used? And if so, where are they being used and who are they being used by? The last problem that I want to touch on here is ECF inventory tracking and audit preparedness. For ECF, there are a number of requirements around auditing, and you have to keep records here for a 10-year period. Those records need to include all sorts of different information, but device type, make, model, serial number, that's sort of the core hardware information that needs to be tracked. But also the name of the person who the device was provided to. If the device was a loaner, you need to record the dates when it was loaned out and when it was returned. If a device goes missing, that needs to be recorded, the date when it goes missing, and damage as well. And so Absolute can help with your audit requirements by tracking all the asset information, make, model, serial number, all that sort of information, as well as some of the other information about missing devices and so on. And as I look into the Absolute console with you and walk through a bit of a demo, I'll show you how we can store that information in the Absolute console so that you're ready in the event of an audit. All right, I'm going to flip over here to the Absolute console and walk you through some of the features that I talked about. This is the main dashboard as you come into the Absolute console. And if I click here on the assets view, this is going to show me every device which is registered to the account. And right away, I can see all sorts of information. I can see the device name. This is the host name on the network. I can see the device serial number. And I can also see the last time it connected. So this is a test account. I have a few devices that connected recently. This device connected 2 minutes ago. This device was online yesterday. And I have a number of devices as well, which haven't connected for a long time, 2 months ago, 4 months ago, 5 months ago. By coming into this report here, I can start to get some information about how devices are being used, if they're being used, and when they were most recently used. You'll also see the username column here. So I can see what user has most recently used that device. And I can compare that with my list of assigned users and make sure that those two things add up. Absolute has a set of custom fields that you can create. So you can actually import that data from other systems, whether that's TipWeb, for example, or any other inventory tracking system that you use. You can import that data into the Absolute console, and you can have those two pieces of information side by side. So you can see the username, the assigned username, and make sure that those two match. You can also see the make and model. So very important for ECF here. We've got all our most critical information. We've got the serial number, we've got the make, the model, the username, all in one spot. If I choose to edit the columns of this report, you can see how many different pieces of information that I can actually pull into this report. Everything from free disk space to the type of CPU, to information about the monitor that is attached to the device or built into the device if it's a laptop. I can pull in encryption status. I can pull in all sorts of interesting information and useful information about the hardware, the operating system, and the software which is running on that device. So we've talked about hardware information. In the presentation, we also talked about location. So when a device goes missing, it's really important to see where is it? Is it in the school, for example? Well, then you know it hasn't been stolen. It's floating around the school somewhere, and that's a very different problem than if the laptop has gone to the other side of the world. So I can click on a specific device here in the Absolute console and move to the location history section. This particular device has no location history, so that's not very helpful. I'm going to flip over actually to a different console and show you a different device that has some location history, and it will show a little bit more about what I'm talking about here. So for location history, this particular device, you can see it was used in Vancouver, Canada. That's where I'm based here. It's very close to where I work. And I can see over the course of the last 7 days, this device has gone to a number of different locations. And I can hover over that location and I can get a little bit more information about it. Or I can scroll down this view at the side, which tells me the time it was at each of those locations. So I can say, okay, September 14th, I can see it was at this location at 2:31 p.m. So using this location history, you can find not only where the device is now, but where the device has been. By default here, we're showing the last 7 days, but I could look back the last 30 days, for example, and see where over time that device has traveled. And so that can be a very, very useful mechanism to see where a device has been. Is it still in the school? Is it in the student's home? Is it still in the same city, or has it left the state? Has it left the country? This location history will tell you exactly that. Along the top here, we have a number of actions, and I'm looking at a single device, so I can take an action on a single device here. Just as easily from that assets report that I showed you, I can select a group of devices and send an action to that group of devices. We talked about messaging. So to send a message is as easy as choosing send a message from this view. And that could be for a single device, or it could be a whole group of devices. We also talked about device freeze. It's as easy as choosing device freeze from this option, selecting a message, and pressing send. And remember that device freeze will actually lock out any logged in user, whereas the message feature will send a message without locking out the user, but it's still a message that has to be acknowledged on the device. The other thing that I wanted to show you in this report is the missing devices feature. So we talked about tools for devices that are reported missing. Let's say, for example, this device here. Well, this device connected 22 minutes ago, so it's probably not missing. Let's choose this device here 11 days ago. Let's say that device went missing. From the menu here, I can choose to report that device missing or stolen. And there's two different paths here. If I've confirmed that the device was stolen, I've actually reported it to law enforcement as a crime, and I have a police report, then I can go through this step here to create a theft report, and that's going to engage our investigations team to find that device and recover it. If, on the other hand, I'm not sure whether that device has been stolen, it's probably actually just misplaced or lost, then I can choose to track that missing device. So I've got a little bit of information here about which device I chose. It could be a single device, or it could be a group of devices. So if, for example, as we talked in that year-end device return process, I probably have a group of devices that haven't come back. I could select that entire group of devices and then choose in one step here to report those missing devices, to flag them as missing, so that when they come online, I get an email. So I can add my email address here. And then as soon as those devices, and I could have a whole list of email addresses here, but for now I'll add my email address. As soon as that device comes online, I'll get an email notifying me that that device is online. So we talked about device freeze, we talked about location, we talked about hardware information, we talked about the missing device feature. I did want to show you device freeze as well, so I'm going to switch back to this view. Oh, no, sorry, wrong one. I have two different consoles working at once. One works better for demoing some features, the other works better for demoing other features. So let me switch back to this one. And choose device freeze, so I can show you what that looks like. So I can choose a freeze here. That particular device is not eligible. Let's try another one. Okay, that one's not eligible either. Okay. So in the device freeze here, I can add a message, and there's a number of different messages that I can choose. One of the interesting things is I can choose any kind of message here. I've talked to some people who feel that one of the best and most effective device freeze messages is not a message that says this device has been stolen, please return immediately, but a message that says something like, this device has a hardware problem, please return to IT at this address, this phone number. And they've found, actually, through some experimentation, that if the message says that there's a hardware problem, they're actually much more likely to get the device back, which is kind of interesting. But you can actually put any message here that you like. There is some control here over font and bold, italic, and so on. And you can also add images as well. So I could add an image here. That could be the logo of the school district, for example, so that it looks a little bit more official, or it could be a warning icon or anything like that. I can add an image into the message. I can also add some variables here. So if, for example, I've imported some data in from other systems like the assigned user email, I can add that into the message, which again makes it feel more official, and you'll get a higher rate of compliance if you add those small details into the message. Device freeze is, or sorry, that's device freeze. Send message is very similar. It looks slightly different here, but again, there's a number of different messages that you can store. I'm just flipping back to the other console here where I had a saved message. Okay, so here's my saved message. Okay, so here's an overdue device return notice. I have a warning icon here. There's information about who the device is supposed to go back to, contact information like phone number and email address, and so on. So these tools are very easy to use and can really help not only with missing devices, but also with your year-end device reclamation and that inventory return process. So I'm going to pause there, and I will open the chat here. I'm hoping we have a number of questions that have come in through the chat. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, please do enter them in the chat, and I will work my way through it, and I'm hoping to be able to get to everyone. So
Yeah.
let me just go through here. And
I have a couple for you, Ryan.
Oh, okay, fantastic.
Yeah,
Great.
I have them pinned for you. Okay. How do devices get their location? Our Chromebooks do not have GPS or cell capabilities. Is it just known Wi-Fi network triangulation, or like, so yeah, so what he's asking is how does Absolute know the location of devices, especially if there isn't GPS or cell tracking?
Great question. And the answer is kind of an interesting one. Location is incredibly complicated. And the answer is that Absolute uses the best location that's available. So if the device has a GPS chip inside it, we'll use that GPS location. If, on the other hand, the device doesn't have GPS, but it has a Wi-Fi network adapter, and most devices today have a Wi-Fi network adapter, we'll use Wi-Fi location to determine where the device is. And indoors, Wi-Fi is incredibly accurate. It can be accurate within 50 to 100 meters. Or even less sometimes. Sometimes you'll get down to 20 or 25 meters. So indoors, Wi-Fi is very accurate. If the device doesn't have Wi-Fi for some reason, or the Wi-Fi adapter is switched off, for example, then we'll fall back to IP geolocation. So what we'll do is we'll look at the network address, the IP network address that the device has assigned to it, and we'll look at where in the world that network is. And the accuracy of that can vary. We can definitely get to the country level. We can almost certainly get to the state level, and we can likely get to the city level. But we won't be able to get down to say, 50 or 100 feet with IP geolocation. But the key point there is we'll use the best location technology that we have at any given time. So for Chromebooks, we have great success using Wi-Fi location to pinpoint those devices.
Great. A lot of talk about operating systems. Does this work for a variety of operating systems? Is it just Chrome? Is it just Windows? Great
question. Yes. So in terms of operating systems, we support Windows, we support Mac, and we support Chromebooks. You might have a computer lab full of Macs. You might have some one-to-one devices that are Windows devices or one-to-one devices that are Chromebooks. All of those operating systems will support.
And you can, so say a district has a variety of different OSs working. So teachers have iPad or MacBooks and students have Chromebooks. Can you view all of the different devices on a single dashboard, or does it separate them out?
You can see everything on a single dashboard. And actually, I'll share my screen back here and I'll show you. You can see in the assets report here, the top device here is actually a Mac device, Steve's Mac Mini. And we can see that from the make model as well. It's an Apple device. The model is Mac Mini, and here's the year. The second device in the list is a virtual device, so maybe not the best example, but the third one in the list, you can see that this is a Lenovo ThinkPad. So we have an Apple device and a Windows device, all in the same report. We're reporting in the same way. We can see the serial numbers, the usernames, everything side by side in the same view.
Scott is asking if Absolute has some sort of matrix where we can that shows the features available on Chromebooks, Mac, Windows, Androids, and just kind of be able to compare side by side.
Right. Yes, absolutely. We do have a feature matrix, and that should be available on our website, which will show you the different features available on each platform. And there are slight variances between Chromebook, for example, and Windows. But all the features that I've walked through today, the messaging feature, device freeze, location, investigations, all of those features are available on all the platforms, Chromebook, Mac, and Windows.
Oh. Okay, we don't have any more questions in the chat at this time. If anyone feels more comfortable unmuting too, we're at the point where you can do that. So if anyone has any questions, yeah, pop them in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself. I'm going to go ahead and launch the exit survey. I know time is precious, so I'll make sure people have the opportunity to take that. Oh, having some technical difficulties with that one. Okay, seems like that's not going to work. Never mind. Great. Does anyone have the URL to the feature matrix? Yes, Don Richardson, who's on this call, is going to pull that for you, Scott, okay? Well, if no one else has any questions, thanks again so much to Ryan and Scott. We'll be reaching out with some more information at the end of this and with recordings and everything like that. So thank you so much for everyone who showed up, and it was great to have you. It was great to have our presenters, and we will catch you next time. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you, Ryan.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.